The aim of this lecture is to give you an overview about some of the most popular and in-demand nootropics. As the title suggests, the discussion is the role of nootropic drugs and nutrients in the aging individual, or in other words, the healthy or normal individual. This is of course a category that no country's approval body has accepted to date. As such, we will be viewing this information on the basis of international research and experience. The interest around nootropics is indicative of the nature of all real anti-aging medicine. To spot the very earliest signs of change and to take measures to slow, avert, or even reverse the path of deterioration before it becomes a disease. Nootropics are the so-called smart drugs and were first highlighted in the popular books written by Ward Dean, John Morgenthaler and Stephen Folks, who later founded the Cognitive Enhancement Research Institute in California. Both are an excellent source of information on this subject. Mental deterioration is a common problem, often the butt of jokes and an almost accepted, dare I say, natural effect associated with aging. Some neurologists have stated that if we all lived long enough, we would all become senile. The problems normally begin with occasional forgetfulness of relatively unimportant information, slowness of thought, lack of concentration, and shortness of attention span. But clearly, these are all indicators that our mental facilities are not operating at an optimal level. The goal is to spot the signs. Often incidental and perhaps even immaterial at first, they may be associated with mental degeneration. The science of nootropics blossomed in 1972 after the demonstration of the pharmacological uniqueness of piracetam. It led Dr. Gajira to formulate an entirely new category of drugs, which he named nootropics, which is Greek, meaning towards the mind. He defined nootropics as follows. They should enhance learning and memory. They should enhance resistance of learned behaviours or memories to conditions which tend to disrupt them. They should protect the brain against various physical or chemical injuries. They should increase the efficacy of the cortical and subcortical control mechanisms, and finally, they should lack the usual pharmacology of other psychotropic drugs and possess very few side effects and have extremely low toxicity. It is probably true to say that today the classification is used in a wider sense, but that was the original definition developed by the founding scientist. So, let us consider the primary areas of action that any nootropic can enhance to ultimately influence the level of a neurotransmitter. Here, there are various possibilities, including inhibition, for example, reuptake inhibitors. There are also the inhibition of enzymes that would otherwise break down neurotransmitters, for example, monoamine oxidase. Although extremely rare, there are now even accelerators, actually increasing neurotransmitter uptake, and although not understood yet, this has also been shown to enhance function. Agonists stimulate the production of a given neurotransmitter, and under this heading I also include the precursors, chemicals that pass through the blood-brain barrier and stimulate the actions of specific neurotransmitters. Plus methylation, the conversion of one chemical to another, often utilising key nutrients such as the B vitamins and their cofactors. A number of substances have been shown to improve the electrical activity of the brain. Vasodilation is the improvement of blood circulation, essential given that in the case of the brain, the blood has to travel through some of the smallest arteries in the body to supply nutrients for energy. Although closely associated with blood circulation, there are additional energy factors that can come into force, for example, increasing the uptake of glucose. Receptor sensitivity falls upon another novel category, whereby particular substances can upgrade receptors to react more aggressively to the given stimulus without actually increasing chemical levels. A good example of this would be the new drug modafinil. Finally, the category of membrane, where we will see that good membrane health is also a function in cerebral fitness. Just before we look closely at some of the leading nootropics, let us consider some facts and figures about the brain. Typically, the human brain weighs about 3 pounds, representing 2 to 3% of total body weight. It is estimated to contain 10 to 100 billion neurons and approximately 10 times more glial cells, the structural and nutritional support cells surrounding neurons. But whilst the brain weighs 3% of body weight, it normally receives about 15% of the body's total blood supply and 15% of the body's total inhaled oxygen. The brain must use this oxygen, along with its chief fuel, glucose, to produce and burn approximately 20% of the body's total adenosine triphosphate, ATP. Unlike most cells, which can burn either fat or glucose for their energy production needs, neurons can only burn glucose under normal, non-starvation conditions, and they can consume 50% of the total blood sugar. Unlike liver and muscle cells, which can store large amounts of sugar as glycogen, neurons can only store at most a minute or two's worth of glucose. Thus, they are extremely dependent on a continuous and uninterrupted blood supply to maintain normal energy metabolism and avoid injury or death. Most other cells reproduce continually throughout a lifetime. Yet, after the brain reaches a full complement of neurons at about 2 years of age, neurons never reproduce, so they are an irreplaceable essential of life. Under normal conditions of adequate oxygen supply, neurons convert glucose into energy as ATP through a 3-phase process. The first phase occurs in the cytoplasm of the cell and is called aerobic oxygen-using glycolysis. Glucose is metabolized into ATP and, in addition, pyruvic acid is produced. This is then metabolized through the Krebs cycle inside the mitochondria to generate more ATP. An additional energy-rich substance, NADH, is also produced. NADH is the coenzyme of vitamin B3. It is also transported to the mitochondria, where it serves as a fuel in the third phase of energy metabolism, the electron transport side chain, to produce more ATP. So, ultimately, through the successful interaction of aerobic glycolysis, the Krebs cycle, and the electron transport chain, a single molecule of glucose can yield a maximum of 38 molecules of ATP bioenergy. This is assuming that there is adequate oxygen for both the glycolysis and the mitochondrial respiratory metabolism. However, when neurons are undersupplied with oxygen, a different form of sugar burning occurs, called anaerobic, without oxygen glycolysis. Here, for each molecule of glucose burned, only 2 molecules of ATP are produced. Also, instead of producing the valuable Krebs cycle fuel pyruvic acid, anaerobic glycolysis produces the somewhat toxic waste product, lactic acid. To summarize, when glucose brain fuel is burned without adequate oxygen, it produces only 5% as much ATP energy as when glucose is burned with adequate oxygen. Essentially, there are 3 main uses for ATP inside neurons. That's maintenance, electrical, and neurotransmitter functions. Since neurons don't reproduce and must last a lifetime, they are continually expending energy to repair or replace various cell components. Neurons also use ATP to produce, transport, package, secrete and reuptake neurotransmitters, which provide cell-to-cell communication. Massive amounts of ATP are necessary to facilitate the frequent discharges of electrical energy from the receiving end of the neuron, the dendrites, through the cell body, where the signal processing occurs, and down to the transmitting end, the axon. For this electrical process to occur, there must be a rapid and continuous exchange of sodium and potassium ions back and forth across the neuronal membranes. This exchange process depends on the sodium-potassium pumps powered by sodium-potassium ATPase enzyme systems. It has been estimated that as much as 45% of a neuron's ATP may be used to power these pumps. So it should be evident why unconsciousness rapidly occurs if breathing stops or if brain blood flow is interrupted, even briefly. As the delivery of oxygen to the brain halts, neurons rapidly shift from aerobic to anaerobic energy metabolism, with a consequent drop in energy production of 95%. There will simply not be enough ATP energy to make neuronal electrical activity and neurotransmitter discharge possible, the electrochemical basis for consciousness. Plus, if aerobic metabolism ceases for too long, eventually either irreparable damage or even cell death may occur, as even the maintenance neuronal activities fall behind due to the energy shortage. Now, of course, for most of us, falling unconscious or suffering brain death due to cessation of breathing or brain blood flow is not a regular problem to contend with, but a more subtle, insidious, slow-developing form of brain energy crisis can and does occur, to some degree, over a lifetime, in the form of cerebral arteriosclerosis, mini-strokes, or transient ischemic attacks. In other words, brief interruptions of brain blood supply often due to blood vessel spasm. In its early stages, this brain energy crisis may lead to only the slightest of symptoms, subtle memory impairment, occasional confusion or lapses in concentration, more difficulty in learning, etc. But at a more advanced stage, the brain energy crisis may manifest itself as senility and eventually may terminate in coma or death. Dr. Branconier noted, "The severity of the dementia is directly correlated to the loss of functional brain tissue, independent of the primary neuropathology. This view is consistent with evidence from studies of cerebral blood flow, oxygen uptake, and glucose utilization that have shown that brain carbohydrate metabolism is impaired in a variety of dementias, and that the degree of reduction in brain carbohydrate metabolism is correlated with the severity of the dementia." Orthomolecular pioneer Abraham Hoffa has suggested that when the brain oxygenation becomes deficient, neurons switch to anaerobic glycolysis as their main energy source. This may provide enough energy for the neurons to survive, but it will not provide enough energy to power their functional roles as electrochemical signal processors and transmitters. Then the affected neurons will be offline in an electrically idling state. But if normal aerobic metabolism is restored before irreparable cell damage or death occurs, then the neurons and their functions can be restored. What we have attempted to indicate here is the massive and constant energy demands of the brain and the critical consequences if energy production is interrupted for even a brief period. During the course of aging, there is a gradual decline in blood flow, reducing energy production capability and altering neuronal and mitochondrial structure, etc., which will be discussed later. Plus, we strongly believe that the accumulation of toxins, particularly heavy metals such as mercury, can rapidly speed up this process. Let's look at the nootropics, starting with the original racetams. The first one was piracetam, developed from GABA. It was first synthesized by UCB laboratories in Belgium in the 1960s. Its original use was to treat motion and altitude sickness, but the published references inform us that it can aid learning, protect against various neurotoxins, treat amnesia induced by hypoxia and electroshock, and even accelerate EEG return to normal in hypoxic conditions. Interestingly, piracetam has an LD50 better than salt. The LD50 is literally the lethal dose at which 50% of animals die. The fact that piracetam has to actually be dosed at more than salt to reach its LD50 makes it one of the safest pharmacological developments ever produced. The two most consistently available racetams are piracetam and aniracetam, with occasional sightings of pramiracetam and oxiracetam. All the analogues have been shown to be more potent than piracetam when comparing dosage to body weight, with usually half to a quarter of the equivalent piracetam dosage required. One clinical trial suggested that the optimal dose of piracetam was 100 milligrams per kilogram body weight, but that pramiracetam's optimal dose was 15 milligrams per kilogram body weight, effectively making it 7 times more potent. However, I can tell you that the majority of the analogues cost 2 to 4 times more gram to gram than piracetam, so that may influence your decision. Piracetam has a number of methods of action to improve learning and memory. It protects brain membranes under low oxygen conditions and also has an action on receptors to enhance acetylcholine. But perhaps the most interesting action of piracetam is its ability to help information pass across the brain's corpus callosum. This is a bundle of nerves that connect the two hemispheres. As we know, the right side of the brain controls the left side of the body and vice versa. The left side of the brain is considered to be the language centre as well as the dominant hemisphere. It tends to be logical, analytical and sequential. The right side of the brain tends to be intuitive, holistic and picture-orientated. Research shows that people favour one hemisphere over the other, with the dominant cortex being more electrically active. Piracetam improves this intra-hemisphere communication and enhances electrical activity. As a result, studies indicate that there are improvements to short-term memory, enhanced vigilance, attention, and most interestingly, the ability to have ideas and turn them into reality. One way to determine communication over the corpus callosum is a hearing test called dichotic listening. The speech centres of the brain are located in the left hemisphere. Because the nerves from the ears cross over to the opposite side of the brain, most people will recall more words presented to the right ear than the left ear. Words received by the right ear directly reach the left cortex speech centre, while words presented to the left ear have to reach the left cortex speech centre by crossing the corpus callosum. Diamond's experiments with young, healthy volunteers show that piracetam significantly improves left ear word recall. Diamond's conclusion was, the fact is that piracetam improves verbal learning, and in this it would appear to be a substance which is capable of extending the intellectual functions of man. Our subjects were not senile, suffering from generalized brain disorders, confusional states, or any other pathology of the brain. It is therefore possible to extend the power which individuals already gifted with higher intelligence and good memory to still higher levels, despite the fact that the range of their achievement is already high. Healthy aging individuals note that piracetam makes them more creative and improves clarity. Piracetam is also noted as being synergistic with other substances, including caffeine, and particularly with those of a choline base, such as DMAE or centrophenoxine. At normal dosages, there are virtually no noted side effects and no known contraindications with the product except for rare cases of hypersensitivity. Piracetam is used in anti-aging medicine at doses of 800 mg to 2400 mg 2 to 4 times daily, and is perhaps the most widely used and best-selling memory agent in preventative medicine today. Another one of the most popular nootropics is Depronel, otherwise known as Selegiline. Its primary medical use is to treat the symptoms of Parkinson's disease because Depronel helps to improve brain levels of dopamine, the neurotransmitter that is most affected by that disease. Depronel inhibits monoamine oxidase type B, an enzyme that breaks down dopamine, and PEA, phenylethylamine. However, those of you who read the Aging Matters magazine, antiaging-systems.com, or know of Professor Joseph Knoll's research will also be aware that Dr. Knoll now believes that Depromel's primary mode of action is to resensitize dopamine and PEA receptors. Whilst dosages in the treatment of Parkinson's disease can often be 20 mg a day or higher, those utilising Depronel for an anti-aging program are more likely to use just a few milligrams daily. So why use Depronel? This graph illustrates the point. The vertical axis represents the amount of dopamine in the brain as a percentage, The horizontal axis represents chronological age. You can see when the levels of dopamine have declined by 70 to 80% of optimal that Parkinson's disease is diagnosed. This is a fundamental issue for anti-aging physicians because they want to concern themselves with recognizing the much early stages of the disease. Perhaps in this case when only 20% of dopamine levels have fallen, so that a course of treatments can begin much sooner to help delay and prevent the occurrence of a dementia. We all know the story. You tell a GP that your memory isn't what it was. You can't remember your neighbour's name. You seem to forget your appointments and are always searching for the keys. And they tell you that you have to get used to it. You're just getting older. But an anti-aging physician has to consider such items to be an early sign of age-related memory decline and then to recommend proactive options. Let's look again at the graph. Here's a typical dopamine decline line for someone with rapid Parkinson's disease. You can see that in their 50s they are diagnosed with Parkinson's, and that as death ensues with dopamine levels of 10%, their expiry age is in their 60s. This line represents the dopamine decline of the average Parkinson's patient. They reach senile dementia in their 60s and may live on into their 70s. Now this line represents what an average healthy person may achieve who won't be diagnosed with Parkinson's, not at least if something else doesn't kill them beforehand. They could see an age of 100 before the development of the disease. Now here's what we may expect with an individual adopting a life extension program, utilising something like Deprenyl to help maintain dopamine and brain function. You can see that the curve is much improved and that function and death is delayed much longer into the future. Clearly, the protection of brain function is a fundamental part of a preventative program. Deprenyl doses for anti-aging purposes are usually utilised at 1 mg or 2 mg daily. As these dosages are so small, the preference tends to be for a liquid Deprenyl because dosages can be titrated at 1 drop 1 mg, although some people prefer to take the 5 mg tablets 1, 2 or 3 times a week. The positive effects of a Deprenyl supplement program include greater well-being, libido stimulation, improved short-term memory and enhanced alertness. These effects are sometimes noted within hours of taking the product. At these lower dosages, many of the side effects and issues that are associated with high doses of Deprenyl in Parkinson's patients are not prevalent. However, some contraindications may occur when combining with other potent MAO inhibitors, for whilst Deprenyl strictly only acts upon MAO-B, it is known to also interfere with MAO-A at dosages over 10 mg. So, is there any evidence that Deprenyl can extend lifespan? A clue may come from Dr. Knoll's experiments with rats. The vertical axis indicates the percentage of the animals alive as a group, and the horizontal axis indicates their age in weeks. This line shows the control animals, i.e. those who did not receive Deprenyl. The first one dying at 148 weeks, and the last one dying at 163 weeks. Now here's the line showing the Deprenyl-treated animals. The first one dying at 176 weeks, and the last one dying at 224 weeks. As you can see, even the oldest of the rats who were not given Deprenyl all died before the youngest of the rats who were given Deprenyl did. In fact, Dr. Knoll's experiments increased the average lifespan of these animals by 30%. What's also important to know is that Dr. Knoll noted that the Deprenyl-treated rats displayed much more activity, social and sexual behaviour even into old age. This indicates that their optimal health span as well as their lifespan was being improved. Two further researchers, Milgram and Catani, replicated this experiment, and although there were some differences, including the ages and types of rats used, they achieved 16% and 34% models of life extension respectively. Having proved it is possible to increase the lifespan and activity of rats, what are the implications for humans? Dr. Knoll has repeatedly emphasized that the substantia nigra, the tiny dopamine-producing nerve cluster located in the basal ganglia, or so-called old brain, typically dies off at the rate of 13% per decade, starting in our 40s. This would literally set the human technical lifespan to approximately 120 years. Is it a coincidence that the maximum verifiable lifespan to date was Jian Calment, who died in 1997 at 122? Dr. Knoll has suggested that if Deprenyl was used from the age of 40-something onward, and even if it only modestly lowered the nigral striatal neuron death rate from 13% to 10% per decade, then the average human lifespan might increase 15 years, and the human technical lifespan could increase to about 145. Dr. Knoll's 50 years of research has convinced him that it is the role of the catecholaminergic neurons to keep the higher brain centres in a continually active state, and that this activity reaches a maximum at sexual maturity and then after begins a gradual downhill slide. The catecholamines refer to the interrelated neurotransmitters of dopamine, noradrenaline, and adrenaline. Dr. Knoll has concluded that the regulation of lifespan must be located in the brain. Certainly, Dr. Knoll's animal research has shown that catecholaminergic activity, learning ability, sexual activity, and longevity to be inextricably linked. But fascinatingly, Dr. Knoll's key conclusion is that the catecholaminergic system can be improved at any time during life. So it is feasible to transform a lower-performing, potentially shorter-living individual to a better-performing, longer-living one. Naturally, it is too early to tell if taking Deprenyl will increase the lifespan of human beings, but as Dr. Knoll himself helped to develop Deprenyl, and has been taking it regularly since the 1970s, he may be the oldest example we currently have, and at the age of 80, he is an active university professor still involved in the pharmacological development of new drugs. Let's look at a nootropic primarily involved in vasodilation. The brain and the eyes are where the smallest so-called microcapillaries are located. Arteriosclerosis is associated with aging, and whilst everyone is familiar with its cardiovascular issues, the brain is often not thought about in the same way. Yet platelet aggregation in the brain can quickly prevent or inhibit blood flow to the neurons, with a consequent lack of energy. A key chemical that has proven itself to be beneficial for brain blood flow is vinpocetine. Vinpocetine is produced by slightly altering the vincamin molecule extracted from the vinca minor plant, otherwise known as the periwinkle. Vinpocetine has been shown to be a cerebral metabolic enhancer and a selective cerebral vasodilator, enhancing oxygen and glucose uptake from blood by brain neurons and thereby increasing neuronal ATP bioenergy production even under hypoxic conditions. Both vincamin and vinpocetine have been widely researched and used clinically for over 30 years in disorders ranging from cerebral arteriosclerosis to Meniere's disease, senile dementias, diabetic retinopathy, and tinnitus. However, research has gradually shown vinpocetine to be the superior vinca alkaloid because it has few, if any, side effects and all are minor. Plus, it has a greater range of clinical and metabolic benefits than vincamin. Vinpocetine has been shown to reduce the cell death that normally occurs when a brain region is temporarily but severely deprived of blood flow. It is proven to be unique in that it is a selective cerebral vasodilator with a non-steal effect. In other words, it appears to only improve blood flow where it is necessary. Salty and co-workers reported their results using vinpocetine on 10 men having an average age of 49, all suffering from minor cerebrovascular disorders. They concluded that vinpocetine belongs to a rare class of drugs which exert a potent yet favourable effect on the cerebral circulation. In particular, they stated that vinpocetine strongly reduced cerebral vascular resistance, which is typically seen in cerebral vascular disease and aging, had no marked effect on systemic circulation, for whilst blood pressure and total vascular resistance is decreased very slightly under high doses of vinpocetine, far from increasing, it actually reduces the effort of the heart. Thus, its effects may be assumed to be favourable in cerebral alterations associated with heart disease and hypertension. Another study with 100 patients suffering from poor blood circulation to the eye, Khan and Ola noted vinpocetine's inhibition of platelet aggregation. Some of the microvessels that feed neurons in the brain and retina are smaller in diameter than a single red blood cell, so they can be easily clogged up by clumps of platelets, impairing local microcirculation. So, vinpocetine can inhibit unnecessary platelet aggregation, which may be triggered by a high-fat diet, magnesium deficiency, and stress hormones, among other factors. Dosages are typically 5 mg to 10 mg 2 or 3 times a day. Hydrogene has been available since the 1970s. It is an ergoloid mesylate, an extract of a fungi grown on rye. There are a number of actions of hydrogene, which is officially listed as stimulating dopaminergic and serotonergic receptors and blocking alpha adrenoreceptors. But one of its most interesting actions is its ability to stabilize oxygen and improve energy availability. So much so that it is used in electroshock and drowning emergencies. However, it is its impact on mitochondria that we will focus on today. The mitochondria are the intracellular powerhouses where the universal energy molecule ATP is generated. It is known that mitochondria are to be found at their highest numbers in rats of 12 months of age, equivalent to a 25-year-old human, and thereafter they progressively decline. There are literally thousands of them in every cell and where high energy environment exists. Up to 40% of the cytoplasmic space is occupied by mitochondria, i.e. heart and liver cells are 20 to 25%. With aging, the numbers of mitochondria decline, but the size of the remaining mitochondria increase. It would appear that their maximum efficiency is achieved by a large number of small, highly efficient units, which is the young model, unlike the old model, which is fewer, larger, inefficient units. What is significant about hydrogene is that it has been shown to change the total volume of old rats' mitochondria to those of young rats. Furthermore, mitochondrial size and efficiency is also altered in a youthful direction, as seen in these charts. Mitochondria are vital cells. However, in the process of creating ATP, they expose themselves to free radical damage. As each mitochondria provides energy for the cell it occupies and cannot borrow energy from other sources, their condition is a critical factor. The conclusion of Bertoni and Frodari's test, shown here, is that hydrogene can significantly restore youthful morphological characteristics to mitochondria, which for our purposes is highly significant as they assist in the production of brain energy. The last item about hydrogene to focus on is its ability to stimulate the growth of dendrite nerve fibres. Dendrites can normally be expected to decline with aging, and some scientists have associated the number and density of dendrites with intelligence. Hydrogene is therefore used to improve cognitive function, clarity and mood at dosages of approximately 1.5 mg to 5 mg daily. Controlled clinical tests have revealed that hydrogene improves symptoms of mental deterioration related to aging, such as instability, dizziness, concentration, disorientation, memory loss, lack of initiative, depression, lack of sociability, and difficulties in carrying out everyday activities. On an anecdotal level, many report that hydrogene reduces brain fog, or situations where physically you are awake, but mentally you want to switch off. Plus, hydrogen seems to expand the periods at which high-level mental workload can be undertaken, so it can be very useful when you need to get things done. Now we turn to vasopressin. This pituitary hormone is best known for controlling water balance in the body. Its common name is antidiuretic hormone. This is because of its property of conserving water and inhibiting urine production. Because of this, many parents of children with bedwetting problems find it useful, as do men with prostate conditions. Vasopressin doesn't affect the prostate, but it does reduce urine production, resulting in fewer sleep interruptions. Our interest lies in the fact that vasopressin acts as a neuropeptide in the hypothalamus, imprinting new information into our memories. Vasopressin levels decline with age. Consequently, it has been used to treat memory deficits due to aging, senile dementia, Alzheimer's disease, Korsakoff syndrome, and amnesia. Vasopressin improves attention, retention, and recall, both short-term and long-term, and it is noted to enhance short-term memory in normal adults as well as those with age-associated memory impairment. In addition, it has been shown to improve both mood and memory in the elderly, including those with Alzheimer's disease. Vasopressin can be very useful when learning large amounts of new information because it can improve the ability to memorize and recall later, known as imprinting. It can be particularly helpful when cramming for exams, trying to memorize a speech, or when listening to lectures. A fairly recent study by Peras demonstrated an additional benefit of vasopressin. Subjects used a dose of 40 IU per day, administered as a nasal spray at bedtime. 40 IU is 2 sprays. Over a period of 3 months, the researchers found the time spent in slow-wave sleep more than doubled. Slow-wave sleep is the most restful kind of sleep. It is during this period that growth hormone is released. Peras and his colleagues hypothesized that in addition to its direct effects as a neuropeptide, vasopressin could have other mechanisms, including acting as a corticosteroid receptor agonist. Doctors Sydney and Constance Friedman at the University of British Columbia studied the effects of vasopressin on the lifespans of already old rats. They administered posterior pituitary powder, a source of vasopressin, to 2-year-old rats. The study was terminated at 180 days. Only 44% of the controls were still alive. In contrast, 62% of the treated rats survived. The authors also reported better fur condition, increased muscular tone, absence of age-related pituitary and adrenal enlargement, and fewer skin lesions in the treated animals. So here we have yet another brain chemical that is influencing not only brain function, but perhaps also longevity. If you wish to find a source of vasopressin, you have to ask for desmopressin nasal spray. This is its synthetic name. With aging, there is a loss of water within the cell and its membranes, with a consequent decline in the performance of cell-to-cell communication, resulting in a cascade of events. One of the most popular supplements to assist in the rejuvenation of the cellular machinery is centrophenoxine. The beneficial effects of centrophenoxine have been observed in various human disorders, including cerebral atrophy, brain injury, post-stroke status, chronic alcoholism, and barbiturate intoxication. Clinical trials with centrophenoxine in geriatric patients with such symptoms as confusion, extreme weakness, and disturbances of memory and intellectual concentration reveal marked improvement after several weeks of treatment. Clinical studies have also reported a significant improvement of such symptoms as fatigue, irritability, confusional states, and loss of memory in patients treated with centrophenoxine. We find that the most common report with centrophenoxine use is that it speeds up the memory recall process. In other words, you can remember things faster and with greater clarity. One of the most interesting actions of centrophenoxine is its ability to remove lipofascin. Lipofuscin is a garbage residue, a conglomerate of membrane fragments, damaged proteins and fatty acids that accumulate over time in cells. They are particularly prevalent in the brains of Alzheimer's victims. Sometimes referred to as age pigment and occasionally as liver spots, lipofuscin is known to accumulate in the brain, heart, lungs and skin. The fact that centrophenoxine is an effective remover of lipofuscin deposits is a clue to its effectiveness as a nootropic agent. Dosages of centrophenoxine are usually 250 mg to 500 mg once or twice daily. Although centrophenoxine is generally safe and non-toxic, it can sometimes cause problems because it is also an effective cholinergic enhancer. Excessive brain or peripheral nervous system levels of acetylcholine can lead to headaches, neck or shoulder muscle tension, insomnia and agitation. If any of these symptoms occur, simply discontinue the dose for several days and then resume at a reduced dosage. Those especially sensitive to centrophenoxine may only need to use it on alternate days to avoid cholinergic excess. Briefly, here are some other substances that are also clinically proven and worthy of mention. They include phosphatidylserine, effectively a biological detergent for membranes; acetyl L-carnitine, an amino acid that improves acetylcholine levels and one which was found to be synergistic with the antioxidant lipoic acid; ginkgo biloba, perhaps one of the most popular herbs from the health food shop. It improves brain blood flow. Galantamine, an extract from the snowdrop plant family. This chemical has been cited to act as an acetylcholine esterase inhibitor and also stimulate nicotinic receptors. Modafinil and its younger sister, adrafinil. These unique drugs form a class known as eugerics, another Greek term meaning good arousal. They stimulate alpha-1 receptor sites to noradrenaline, and in so doing create alertness and wakefulness and have revolutionized the treatments of cataplexy and narcolepsy. SAMe, involved in methyl donor conversion. SAMe has diverse uses, as it is widely used in varied chemical processes throughout the body, therefore has a major role in the production of ATP. NADH, the coenzyme of vitamin B3, with vital roles in the production of ATP, plus the published work of Dr. Berkmeyer has shown it to be useful in the treatment of Parkinson's disease. Pyritinol, a vitamin B6 analogue that enhances brain energy glucose levels. And finally, pregnenolone, the so-called grandmother sterone, because it is the first step from cholesterol. To date, pregnenolone has shown itself to be the most important hormone for neuronal health, being up to 100 times more effective than DHEA. In conclusion, don't overlook the potential of nootropics. Many of them represent true anti-aging medicine as they offer both brain protection and enhancement. Furthermore, by acting upon the aging control centers in the brain, their benefits could equate beyond mere mental performance. Protecting and enhancing brain function is a long-term benefit most people want to enjoy. To remain lucid and agile in older life is fundamental, for we are nothing without our minds and our ability to communicate clearly and effectively with those around us. But like nearly all SNES, if one recognises it early and treats it early, the outcomes can always be improved. Waiting for disease is not the answer, and in this case, waiting to hear the prognoses of a senile dementia is bad news indeed. For at present there are no tools on the immediate horizon that can effectively reverse them. This therefore makes measures that slow and arrest mental deterioration of paramount importance. It is also worth noting that the positive side effects of many nootropics are often felt by the patient within days, and sometimes even within hours. This offers effective, measurable benefits. This is not often the case with anti-aging medicine because when dealing with healthy individuals, changes are small and therefore the prescription is often undertaken on faith. Nootropic products achieve the ultimate goal of any true preventative or anti-aging medicine. They extend the health span of the individual. We believe this can have a positive effect on the lives of millions and society as a whole. Thank you very much for your attention.